Alam mo, with taxation, one thing I've realized is that your determination to make a change won't really matter if those who are in position does not agree with your action. Voices from the past. Letters on Philippine Taxation.
O Pilipinas.
Dear Philippines.
Dear Philippines.
O Pilipinas.
O Pilipinas kong mahal.
Noong unang panahon sa ating bayan, ang pagbabayad ng buwis at ang obligasyong magbigay ng serbisyo sa mga dato ay tila isang bahagi na ng ating buhay. Madalas kong isipin na ang mga utos ng mga lider ay parang mga buwis na dapat naming bayaran. Isang kasanayang naipasa mula sa mga ninuno hanggang sa ating mga panahon. Ngunit nang dumating ang mga Espanyol, ang sistemang ito ay umikot sa isang mas masalimuot na anyo. Nagpasimula sila ng tributo, isang buwis na ipinataw sa aming mga Pilipino upang punduhan ang mga pangangailangan ng mga kolonya. Ang mga bayarin na ito ay tila walang katapusan at kami pinilit na magbigay ng bahagi ng aming mga ani at yaman. Sa kalaunan, ipinakilala ang reduction at pueblo system na nagdala ng mas sentralisadong pamumuhay. Sa wakas, ang mga dispersed settlements ay naging mas madaling maabot. Ngunit sa kabila nito, ang mga taong katulad namin ay patuloy na nagbabayad habang ang mga prinsipal, alkalde at iba pang mga opisyal ay hindi nagbabawas ng kanilang mga buwis. Minsan, naiisip ko kung paano kaya ang kanilang buhay na tila wala silang pasanin. Noong 1884, ang pagbabayad ng tributo ay pinalitan ng isang poll tax na kinakailangan naming dalhin sa bawat paglalakbay. Ang sedula personal, isang piraso ng papel, ay naging simbolo ng aming pagkakapilit. Habang kami naglalakad, dala ang aming mga sedula, nagiging mas maliwanag ang hirap na dulot ng mga buwis. Kasama ng poll tax, dumating pa ang mga bagong buwis noong 1878. Ang urbana, isang buwis sa taunang renta ng mga lupa at industriya na ipinataw sa aming mga sahod at kita. Ang lahat ng ito ay tila mga tanim na dumadami sa aming mga balikat, habang ang mga elite ay patuloy na nag-i-enjoy sa kanilang mga pribilehiyo. Hindi lamang ito, sa pilitang paggawa ang naging bahagi rin ng aming buhay. Kinakailangan kaming magbigay ng serbisyo, mga araw na walang bayad, at ang aming mga oras na dapat sana'y ginugol para sa aming pamilya ay nauubos sa mga utos ng mga Espanyol. Kasama ng mga ito, ang sanctorum na 3 reales para sa simbahan ay isang dagdag na pasanin. Ang donativo de Zamboanga ay kinolekta upang labanan ng mga Moro, isang bagay na hindi namin napipigilan. At ang vinta, kalahating real o isang gantang bigas, ay kailangan namin ibigay taon-taon para sa mga coastal patrol sa paligid ng Metro Manila. Kung nais namin makaiwas sa polo, ang sapilitang paggawa, kinakailangan naming magbayad ng 7 pesos sa pala, isang malaking halaga para sa amin, ngunit ito ang tanging paraan upang makaiwas sa mas mabigat na pasanin. Sa ilalim ng lahat ng ito, kami patuloy na nagtataguyod, umaasa na balang araw ay magkakaroon kami ng mas magandang kinabukasan. Kahit na ang aming mga pagsubok ay tila walang katapusan, ang aming pag-asa ay mananatili.
As I sit here, reflecting the years from 1898 to 1903, I can't help but remember the struggles faced with the Filipino people under the new American governance. It was a time of transition, but for many, it felt like a burden rather than a promise of progress.
When the urbana tax was replaced with land tax, it seemed logical to officials, but it was a reality for the common folks that was harsh. Landowners faced heavy taxation on properties as they worked tirelessly to cultivate, and many small farmers are struggling financially for them to keep their homes and lands.
In 1904, the introduction of the Internal Revenue Act was a reaction to the difficulties in collecting land taxes. It was a complicated system that often left the very people it intended to help even more confused and frustrated. The changes to the cedula system, where the rate was now fixed per adult male, felt like another weight added to the shoulders of the struggling families. Many could barely afford to pay the fees, and those who fell behind were left vulnerable to harsh penalties. As we moved into the next decade, the industrial tax emerged, targeting businesses and further straining the economy. I watched as small shopkeepers and artisans felt the pinch. Their dreams of prosperity dimmed under the relentless pressure of taxation. The air was thick with worry as each new tax seemed to deepen the hardship faced by everyday Filipinos.
In 1913, the Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act was passed. It has been promised that it would make trade easier, but it ended up decreasing the government's revenue. I would recall Governor Harrison urgent pleas for increased taxation, but it was the ordinary people who bore the brunt of these decisions. The cries of the mother trying to provide for their children echoed in my mind as the struggles grew deeper.
When the income tax was introduced in 1914, it felt like another blow. Many families were barely getting by, and now they had to account for another deduction from their already meager incomes. Then came 1919 with the inheritance tax, which added a layer to the despair of grieving families, who found themselves not only mourning their loved ones, but worrying about the financial implications of their passing.
And in 1932, the National Lottery was established. It got mixed reactions from people. Some view it as a revenue for the government's projects, and some view it as a desperate gamble. It was a stark reminder on the ongoing struggles and lengths to which the government would go to support itself. Through all this, I witnessed the resiliency of the Filipino people despite their adversity. They have adapted, survived, and supported themselves despite the weight of taxation. It was a harsh lesson in the realities of governance, and it left a mark on my heart as I have understood the complex relationship between the power and the people it serves.
Bilang isang Pilipino sa panahon ng Commonwealth, marami akong naranasan at nasaksihan ng mga pagbabago na nagbigay daan sa ating bansa. Noong 1936, nang itinaas ang mga rate ng income tax, naramdaman ko ang bigat nito sa aming kabuhayan. Para sa mga ordinaryong mamamayan tulad namin, bawat sentimo ay mahalaga. Alam namin kinakailangan ang pondo para sa pag-unlad ng ating bayan. Ngunit sa kabila ng pangako ng mga lider, kami pa rin ang labis na naaapektuhan. Noong 1937, nang abolish ang cedula. Ito ay parang isang magandang balita. Sa wakas, parang may pag-asa na ang mga leader natin ay nakikinig sa mga hinaing ng karaniwang tao. Ipinakita nito na may mga hakbang na ginagawa upang mapabuti ang kalagayan ng mga mamamayan. Pero sa likod ng ngiti ng iyon, ramdam pa rin ng marami sa amin ang pasanin ng mga buwis. Ang mga nasa mababang antas ng lipunan, kasama ang pamilya ko, ay patuloy na nahihirapan. At tila, hindi sapat ang mga reforma para maibsan ang mga problema. Pumunta tayo sa 1940, nang ipanatupad ang residence tax sa lahat ng mamamayan na 18 taon gulang pataas. Bagamat ang layunin ay magandang makapag-ambag sa pagpapaunlad ng bansa, ang pakiramdam ko ay tila kami muling pinagsasamantalahan. Paano kami makakapag-ambag kung ang aming kita ay sapat lamang para sa mga pangunahing pangangailangan? Ang mga tulad namin na abala sa pagtatrabaho para makaraos, nahirapan pang magbayad ng buwis na ito. Noong 1939, nang i-draft ng Commonwealth ang National International Revenue Code, nagkaroon ako ng pag-asa na mas magiging makatarungan ang ating sistema ng pagbubuwis. Gusto kong maniwala na amang pagbabago, ito ay makakatulong sa lahat. Ngunit sa kabila ng aking pag-asa, hindi ko maalis ang takot na baka hindi pa rin ito maging sapat para sa mga nakakarami. Parang ang mga patakaran ay higit na nakikinabang ang mga mayayaman, habang kami ay patuloy na nagdarusa sa mga pasanin na buwis. Nang sumiklab ang ikalawang digmaang pandaigdig at umabot ito sa ating bayan, lahat ay nabago ang isip. Ang ekonomiya ng ating bansa ay huminto sa pagunlad at ang mga Hapon ang kumuha ng kontrol sa pangolekta ng buwis. Ang kanilang sistema ay nakatuon sa mga aliwan, pagmamanapaktura at mga negosyo. Ngunit sa katotohanan, ang mga ordinaryong tao ang patuloy na nagdusa. Nakakita ko ang mga tao sa aking paligid na nahihirapan. Ang mga pamilihan ay walang laman at ang mga kabuhayan ay unti-unting naglalaho. Ang takot at kawalang katiyakan ay naghari sa amin. At ang mga pangarap para sa mas magandang kinabukasan ay tila naglaho. Sa kabila ng lahat ng pagsubok na ito, patuloy ang aking pangarap para sa isang mas maliwanag na Pilipinas. Nais ko ang isang bansa kung saan ang buwis ay makatarungan at ang bawat mamamayan, gaano man kahirap ang kanilang kalagayan, ay may boses at bahagi sa ating pagunlad. Sa bawat hakbang, sa bawat desisyon, umaasa akong balang araw ay makakita namin ang isang bansa na tunay na pinahahalagahan ang bawat Pilipino. Isang bansa kung saan ang pag-asa ay hindi lamang isang pangarap, kundi isang realidad na maaaring maabot ng lahat.
Growing up in the Philippines, I remember the echoes of history shaping our lives, especially the winding, long road of taxation and fiscal policy. In the aftermath of World War II, our country was grappling with the remnants of destruction. I was just a child in 1949, but I could feel the frustration around me. The government was pinched for funds and we felt it in our everyday lives. Under President Alpido Quirino, I watched as the nation began to take tentative steps toward progress and recovery. Import and exchange controls were put in place, and I vividly remember my parents talking about how this led to the birth of local industries. They spoke about hope as tax revenues began to surge by 1953, doubling from where they were 5 years prior. However, as the years rolled on, shadows began to loom. Corruption seeped into the cracks of our progress, especially between the year 1959 and 1968, when Congress seemed paralyzed, unable to pass any new legislation. I recall my father again often lamenting about how our public services were underfunded, leaving our communities vulnerable. Then came the term of Marquez, a time when the tax system felt unfairly vital. My friends and I noticed that the burden fell heavily on the ordinary folks, while the wealthy seemed just came with a pinch. The years from 1981 to 1985 saw indirect taxes ballooning, leaving many of us frustrated and very confused. When Corazon Aquino took office, hope flickered anew. I vividly remember the excitement surrounding the 1986 tax reform program, where people talked about equity and fairness. The introduction of the value-added tax, also known as VAT, felt like a turning point, a chance for our tax system to become more just. The intensified tax collection efforts were palpable. It seemed like everyone was being held accountable. In the 1990s, I watched as the Ramos administration prioritized stability and economic growth. The Comprehensive Tax Reform Program of 1997 brought about changes that included service in the VAT base. It was actually fascinating to see our economy evolving, even as some still felt the weight of our regressive tax system. Then there was Joseph Estrada, whose brief presidency left us longing for more and more and more. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo era was marked by increased spending without adequate tax adjustment. I vividly remember the worry in my community as deficits malnourished and came the expanded VAT in 2005 with an increase in tax rates. Conversations turned heated where people felt the pressure of taxes on their daily lives. Finally, during Benigno Aquino's presidency, the promise of no new taxes brought a sigh of relief. The sin tax reform, targeting alcohol and cigarettes, sparked debates about health and revenue. A reminder that taxes could be a tool for public welfare. As I continue to reflect on the journey of our country's taxation, the administration of President Duterte brought yet again another wave of change with the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion law. Promised as a way to simplify the tax system, where it aimed to provide relief to low-income earners while increasing revenues for infrastructure of local social services. I remember the mixed feelings in my community. Some were hopeful about the potential for new projects and improvement in our daily lives, while others were concerned about the rising cost of goods due to the increased excise taxes on fuel and sugary beverages. The debates were lively as people weighed the benefits of development against the immediate burdens on their wallets. With each administration from Quirino to Duterte, the story of our tax system continued to evolve, reflecting our struggles as Filipinos and our aspiration as a total nation. Again, as a Filipino, I've seen how these policies touch each lives, shaping opportunities, igniting discussions, and above all, remembering the importance of fairness and accountability in building a better future for us all.
As someone who has lived through its effects, I believe my perspective might offer some insights into the real-world implications. When the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion, or the train law, was enacted, it aimed to simply the tax structure and reduce income tax rate for the majority of the populace. Initially, I was optimistic about this change, as it was heralded as a means to uplift the underprivileged and spur economic growth. Lower income taxes promised more disposable income for our family, which sounded refreshing, especially in light of the rising cost of living. Moreover, I observed how the implementation of this law affected small businesses in the community. While larger corporations could absorb the rising costs, many small entrepreneurs faced challenges that threatened their survival. Increased operational costs were difficult to pass on to consumers, leading to reduced margins and, in some cases, shuttered businesses. As a customer and a supporter of local commerce, it was disheartening to witness once thriving establishments struggle to stay afloat. Despite these challenges, I also recognize that long-term vision behind the train law. The government has aimed to generate revenue for infrastructure and social services, which we hope will foster and growth and development in the long run. It's crucial that we continue to engage in conversations about how to balance between taxation and the economic well-being of citizens. I believe transparency and accountability in the use of tax will be the key to ensuring that the intended benefits of the train law manifest in tangible movements to improve our daily lives. In conclusion, my experience with train law is a mix of hope and hardship. It is a reminder that policy changes often come with both intended and unintended. I encourage open dialogue about how best to navigate these complexities in the future. Maintaining our focus on economic growth without compromising the welfare of very Filipinos it aims to uplift. Sa gobyernong tapat, angat buhay lahat.
Hearing the stories of our kababayans in our session for the Voices of the Past, the Letters on Philippine Taxation, I can say it's a bit disheartening, but let's skip onto that. I guess it's time that we'll delve deeper on the definitions and terms that was said during the letters or on the letters that was sent to us by our kababayans. So let me call on my partner. Wait a minute. Oh, hello there. Oh, sorry. Let me introduce myself first. Hi, I'm Ace Christian, or you can call me Ace. You can call me Christian. Anything you want. I kinda agree with you that hearing the stories of our kababayans is really disheartening. But for us to be able to understand their stories, we need to know the definitions of the terms that they have said during their story. So first, let's discuss what is tributos nga pala. Tributos is actually a form of tribute or tax collected from the Filipino population during the Spanish colonial period to fund the colonial administration and maintain control over the islands. Before the tributo system was implemented, the people or the Filipinos actually form taxes through labor for our datus or the governor in the modern world. So next, what is the reduction and pueblo system? Reduction and pueblo system is actually a system implemented by the Spaniards to consolidate those who are in dispersed settlements into larger towns for easier governance and tax collection. In parsimony, those who are in those who are in scattered settlements, Spaniards actually moved them into larger towns in order for them to promote Christianization, social order, and tax collection easier. Next, we have the poll tax. Poll tax is actually a tax that was introduced in 1984, requiring all residents to pay a fee and carry a cedula personal, an identification or certificate as a proof, making it a financial burden, especially for the lower classes. To explain it simply, cedula personal is like our school IDs. So we can't enter the school if we don't have school ID because our school ID serves as a proof that we are a bona fide student of that school or of that institution. So Filipinos during the Spanish era actually needs to carry this cedula personal to serve as a proof that they are paying their fees and And those who are in position, the principals, the alcaldes, and the officials, don't actually pay for their they don't actually pay for their taxes, which made it unfair for the ordinary people, especially for the lower class. Next, what is the Urbana and Industria system? Urbana and Industria system is actually direct taxes. Urbana tax was levied on annual real estate rentals, while the Industria tax applied to salaries, dividends, and profits. So, Urbana is, from the word itself, urban, apartments, rentals, while industry, from the word industry, your salaries, your dividends, and your profits. So, you actually need, kailangan siyang kuhaan para makabayad ka ng iyong mga buwis. Next, we have the Sanctorum. Sanctorum is a portion of tribute allocated for church purposes, supporting the Catholic Church and its activities in the Philippines. While Donativo de Zamboanga is a tax collected to finance military efforts against model raids in the southern Philippines. Binta, on the other hand, is a traditional outrigger boat used in the Philippines, often associated with the trading and transportation activities of coastal communities during the Spanish era. While Polo and Fala, to explain this, they are actually intercorrelated. So Polo is a form of forced labor, while Fala is a system where you pay 7 pesos to be exempted from Polo. So, let's say that Polo, in Polo, you're going to perform a forced labor, and in order to be exempted from Polo or the forced labor, you need to pay 7 pesos to the Spaniards for you to be exempted in that labor. And that's all for the Spanish colonization, or the taxation in the Spanish era. Charot lang. Okay, so now let's discuss the definitions of the terms that was stated during the taxation and American period. So what is actually the Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act? Well, the Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act specifically pertains to the United States. Its effects were felt in the Philippines as a U.S. territory. The act aimed to reduce tariff rates on imported goods, promoting free trade and lowering consumer prices. In the Philippines, this facilitated trade with the U.S. and open markets, influenced local economic conditions. It also marked a shift towards a more liberal trade policy, contrasting with previous protectionist tariffs. So the Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act resulted in a reduction in the revenue of the government. So now let's move on to the income tax. The income tax was established under the American colonial government. Malamang kay undergo siya sa taxation sa American period. So, this is particularly through the Internal Revenue Law of 1904, which was stated of the story of the two young beautiful ladies. So, this law introduced a progressive income tax system where higher earners paid a higher percentage. So kung mataas ang kita mo, mataas rin ang income na iyong babayaran. And kung mababa ang income mo, mababa rin ang tax na iyong babayaran. So this actually shows equity among individuals from higher class to the lower class. So the revenue from income taxes was used to fund public services, infrastructures, and educational initiatives, contributing to the modernization of the Philippines. Next is the inheritance tax. Inheritance tax was also introduced during the American period. Obviously. So this tax was levied on the value of property and assets inherited by the beneficiaries after a person's death. So the purpose of this tax was to generate revenue for the government while addressing wealth distribution. So this system aimed to create fairness in taxation, reflecting the American influence on governance and tax policy. So overall, during the American era, taxation in the Philippines evolved to include reforms that modernized the tax system. It aimed to enhance revenue collection and supporting economic development. To simplify everything, the Underwood-Simmons Tariff Act facilitated trade, while income and inheritance taxes helped fund essential services and infrastructure projects. So, yeah, it's that easy. So, goodbye. It's not a goodbye. It's a see you later. Bye! Oh, actually, let's move past the fiscal policy because we're running out of time. But, let's move on to the train law. The Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion Law, or TRAIN Law, enacted in December 2017, is a significant tax reform measure aimed at providing the tax system and boosting revenue for government programs. So first, we have the personal income tax reduction. The TRAIN Law lowered personal income tax rates for many Filipinos, providing relief to low and middle income earners while increasing rates for higher income brackets. So minimum wage earners or the statutory minimum wage rates are exempted from income tax. Minimum wage earners are also exempted or their holiday pays, overtime pays, night shift differential pays, and hazard pays from the minimum or earned by the minimum wage earners are exempted from the income tax because of this law. So next, we have the expanded value added tax or the VAT. The law retained the 12% VAT but removed certain exemptions, broadening the tax base and aiming to increase government revenue. Next, we have the new excise tax. The TRAIN Law introduced new excise taxes on specific foods, including fuels, automobiles, and sugary drinks, aiming to discourage unhealthy consumption and raise additional revenue. Next, we have the simplified estate and donor taxes. The law simplified the estate and donors tax, lowering rates and making the process easier for heirs and beneficiaries. Last but not the least is the social protection measures. To mitigate potential inflation from the tax increases, the government included cash transfer programs for low-income households, providing financial assistance. Overall, the TRAIN Law sought to create a fairer tax system, stimulating economic growth and to generate funds for the infrastructures and social services, although it faced criticisms for contributing to rising prices in the short term. And that's actually all for our podcast. Again, I am Christian Silao, together with my group mates. And here we are. And that's all for the Philippine taxation during each different periods. But that's all. Thank you. Bye. I hope you learned something. Bye.